Buckle your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy night. I'm Erin.
I'm Tom.
And this is Baby's First Watch List, the podcast that's finally covering an old school classic Hollywood film, meaning everyone that is in it or has anything to do with it is probably no longer with us.
Correct. I don't think there's anybody. I mean, like the young person in the movie was Marilyn Monroe, so that goes to show you.
Right.
What.
Exactly. It's 1950s drama all about Eve.
I thought this was gonna be more comedic than it was. Like there were funny moments because Bette Davis is hilarious, but like I thought it was kind of a comedy, and it's not.
It's not. It's very dramatic.
Yeah.
It's very twisty.
Thoughtful.
You got to pay attention a little bit.
Yeah, I did. I have quite a bit of analysis here.
That's good. Because I didn't. I mean, I paid attention for the most part, but I didn't
For the most part.
write stuff. This film was written and directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who won Best Director and Adapted Screenplay at consecutive Oscars. He won this year and then 1949.
Year, right?
No,
the
year
previous
before.
Year. What did he win for?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Didn't write that down.
Okay. I read it in my book.
You also made a point to tell me that he's not Mank.
Right. That was Herman.
And that's his brother.
Yes.
So
he was inspired to make this, not make this, but go on and engage in a career in screenwriting in part because his brother won screenplay for Citizen Kane.
So if you have never seen Mank, don't.
Only if you're super interested. If you're listening to this episode, you might be super interested.
Might be interested. It's just a movie that came out a couple years ago that I think it was nominated for Best Picture.
It was nominated for the most award that year.
That is tragic.
And it won 2.
I like David Fincher, who was the director.
Yeah.
But he did it as a passion project because his dad wrote the screenplay many, many decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad, I guess, died.
He did.
And so he made this movie, black and white, about Herman Mankiewicz, who really wrote Citizen Kane. And the troubles that he had with Orson Welles
being recognized for it.
And being recognized
and
for it.
It was more broadly about Hollywood during that time.
It kind of reminded me a little bit about like Trumbo, the movie with Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Except I like Trumbo more.
Trumbo focused more on one character. Mank had a lot going on.
Too much going on. Amanda Seyfried was pretty good though.
Yeah, she always is.
She always is.
So was Charles Dance, who played
he's always great.
William Randolph Hearst.
What's his name that played Mank?
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman. I don't know, man. First Churchill, now this. I know. All right. So based on the short story The Wisdom of Eve by Mary Orr, who got no credit.
No, she did not.
Which is messed up.
Surprise.
And it was, whatever. All About Eve was a tour de force of acting performances. Acting.
Capital A.
Starring Queen Bette Davis, Anne Baxter, George Sanders, Celeste Holm, and Thelma Ritter. I only picked the people who were nominated for Oscars.
Yeah. Well, the guy who plays her boyfriend, Bill, is Gary Merrill, and he was Bette Davis's 4th husband.
Did they get married? Did they meet on the set?
I don't know if they met on the set, but they got together on the
set, yeah.
She was married coming into it, and the guy was like a terrible, terrible person.
Oh, Betty.
William Sherry, I think his name was. And the reason why her voice is hoarse in this movie is because she was having screaming matches with her husband.
A queen. Just an absolute queen.
And like when she came on, Mankiewicz was the director, you said?
Yes. Writer and director.
Yeah. He was like, I love it. Like the sound of her voice. He was like, I don't want you to work around it. I don't want you, like, it's perfect for this character. Yeah. So that's a little tidbit.
Oh, well, I'm glad it worked out because she ended up marrying this guy for 10 years.
Yeah. And then they divorced. And she said that marriage basically wasn't for her because she wanted to be the movie star and that was it.
And she never remarried after that.
She didn't.
So she was legit.
Yeah.
Eve, All About Eve, also featured Marilyn Monroe in one of her earliest roles. And you really see her comedic chops.
Yeah.
In it.
She was apparently terrible. Not a diva, not anything like that. She was apparently just flubbing her lines constantly. She was new. This was her first movie, was it? One of her first movies.
One of her first movies.
This was also, for this movie, was the only time she attended the Oscars.
I just find her to be the warmest, most lovable person on screen.
Yeah.
I just find her very
This is not a movie filled with
comforting.
lovable people.
It's not. And she's just so sweet. And she's just got these doe eyes. And she's so beautiful. I just love her. I hate Blonde. I hate the movie Blonde so much. All About Eve was released in theaters on October 13th, 1950.
Ooh, a Halloween flick.
A little October spooky season action. To extremely positive reviews at a long 138 minutes. It was a little long.
It kept my attention the whole time, but it was long.
And it dragged a little tiny bit for me, but that's okay. It was also a commercial success, eventually making $8.4 million on a $1.4 million budget, which, I mean, that's a success.
Well, and I think something that needs to be said is the reason why I know all this stuff is because I've been reading this book. I think I mentioned it last week.
Oscar Wars
That Aaron got me. It's by Michael Schulman, I think his name is.
Yeah, it's about Oscar the Grouch.
Yes.
Against
it just so happens
Oscar
to have
Mayer Wieners.
Yeah, it just so happens to have a lot of Hollywood stuff in it. And so I just literally this morning finished the chapter on the 1951 Oscars. So I read all about Eve. I read all about Sunset Boulevard. I read all about the one that Judy Holliday won best actress for, which
Judy
I forget.
Holliday, who's that?
Yeah, that's kind of the point of the chapter, because she beat
Betty
and Ann Baxter and Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard, which it wasn't that the movie was bad. It was just that she didn't really become a big star. She died young. So one other thing about All About Eve is that it came about in part, it was very subversive for the time, because this is a movie that takes aim at Hollywood through the theater sphere. It takes aim at Hollywood, and it takes aim at celebrity relationships, and it takes aim at sort of the fleetingness and the falseness of fame. And that was something you got to think about where we're at in Hollywood right at this point. We're coming off of the war, World War II, where Hollywood was literally printing war propaganda, like for the military. Everything was clean cut. Everything was, there was a certain image that producers like Daryl Zanuck, who was the producer of this, and Louis B. Meyer, and that whole like ilk of older producers was putting out there. They wanted Hollywood to be a certain thing, a certain attitude, a certain look, a certain, Hollywood needed to be clean. This movie's not clean.
Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard is not clean.
Yeah.
Those two movies I found are apparently like linked, because they're both about aging actresses and sort of the aging gracefully and or not, and the cyclical nature of Hollywood and how it sort of chews people up and spits them out. If you've seen Mulholland Drive, the David Lynch movie, it very, very much reminds me of that, but not in like a surreal type of way, and just Sunset Boulevard's a little surreal, but like in more of like a proto version of that. This movie was like a bombshell for its time.
Yeah. And I feel like it came right before McCarthyism.
Right before.
And so that
it started around, like, while this movie was the build up to the Oscars, the McCarthyism stuff was brewing.
And so McCarthy was a, what's his first name?
What?
What's his first name?
Joe McCarthy?
Joe, I wanted to say a couple other names that are not correct.
Okay. Yeah, Joseph R. McCarthy.
Joseph McCarthy, he was a senator?
Yes.
And
from Wisconsin.
And so he had all these hearings and things. He was didn't he lead the House of Un-American Activities or something?
It wasn't just him. It was a thing throughout the government. Coming off of World War II, they thought that there was some
communism.
There was communists. In Hollywood especially, and there's been a lot of, it kind of takes one to know one, because like I said, they were making pro-America war propaganda, so now they thought they were making pro-communist war propaganda, because they already had done it for the Americans.
Right.
So it's like they, without an enemy to fight abroad, they sort of were picking people at home.
And they picked like really famous people too.
They did. They basically initiated a blacklist, though they didn't call it a blacklist, but it really was a blacklist. Of a lot of people suspected of having communist ties, including the likes of like Lucille Ball, Dalton Trumbo, who we mentioned. There was a
Ellie Kazan.
Yeah. One of the actors, the guy who won Best Actor this year for Cyrano de Bergerac, his name was, I think, Jose Ferrer. He was not blacklisted, but he was like very close to being blacklisted, and then he won the Oscar, and they were like, "Oh, I guess he's fine now."
Yeah.
He was actually supposed to have one of the parts in this movie, but I forget which one. Maybe the Addison part.
Okay. Yeah. So that was definitely a time where there was a lot of worry in Hollywood, and certain pictures probably
uncertainty
didn't get made, and
were highly edited, changed.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that this and Sunset Boulevard were able to slip in there.
Well, in the case of Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder, the director, they had like a secret name for the project that they were leaking false information out about it. So like nobody knew what they were filming until they screened it, and then all the producers were like, "There's no way you're putting this movie out." And he was like, "All right, well, I'm going to do it anyway."
So bye. And then he made The Apartment 10 years later.
He did, and he did he also do Some Like It Hot?
Yeah, I think he did. Wait, do I love him?
Billy Wilder's great. And it was like a packed house, and everybody was like, "This is the greatest movie we've ever seen."
Yeah.
About Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
And All About Eve had a similar reception, though it wasn't seen as subversively as Sunset Boulevard was, because this one had actresses who were currently famous. Sunset Boulevard had Gloria Swanson, who was like a silent era star that was literally playing a character that was a silent era star that was washed up and was crazy and thought she was still a star.
Yeah.
So that one is more like we're showing somebody who's already been chewed up and spit out. This one is kind of the process of that.
Yeah, I find, I mean, I liked Sunset Boulevard, but I don't really remember it. I'll have to rewatch it.
We got to rewatch it. It's awesome.
But I really like what they did with All About Eve casting Bette Davis.
Yeah.
Because she still was extremely famous.
Yeah.
But she wasn't young anymore.
This was her 8th Oscar nomination.
Yeah.
For this movie.
I find that super
The
fascinating.
Oscars had only been around for like 20 years.
Yeah. She's amazing. she's amazing.
Yeah.
And
or this may not have been her 8th, but I think she had 8 at some point.
Yeah.
Shortly after.
I find that like it's only been within the past decade or so that older women have a very like not a distinct role in movies, but like more of a place in movies.
Well, let's be honest. The way that medical technology has improved, if the issue with women back then was that the male producers were like, "Oh, they don't look good anymore." Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier for people to keep looking good now when you're Jennifer Aniston and you're 60 whatever years old. You know, what is she like, late 50s or something?
Something like that.
Like that wasn't happening in 1950.
That's true.
And there's nothing. I don't think that people need to be great looking to be on screen, but that's just the way that the producers of this time were.
Yep.
There weren't many dynamic roles for women.
Mm-hmm. And now there's lots.
Yeah.
And I love that. Just as in the movie itself, critics were enamored by Eve.
Yeah.
And it received 14 Academy Award nominations. That was the most at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was beat by Lord of the Rings, Return of the King.
Well, Lord of the Rings was nominated for 11, and it won 11.
Oh, so that dang, dude. That's wild.
It was later tied by La La Land and
that's funny because it's also
and something else, another one that was like relatively recently that also had 14 noms.
That's funny because it's also about Hollywood. Hollywood, but like show business.
I have it on here. I'll find it. Go ahead.
Eve, All About Eve did win 6. It won Best Picture, Best Screenplay, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, because of course the guy wins out of all the female nominations.
He was awesome though.
He was great. Costume design and sound. It was
Titanic was the other one with 14.
Of course, Titanic. It was the first and only movie to have 4 female acting nominations.
Insane.
Although 0 won.
Yeah.
And
there were reasons for that.
Oh, really? Oh, see, Tom, he reads.
Yeah. I do.
It currently has a solid 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was also nominated for 5 Golden Globes, winning only screenplay, which is interesting. And it won a special jury prize at Cannes. It also won like a BAFTA. It like had a whole ton of nominations, but I found those interesting.
Yeah.
In a retrospective review, and they think the year 2000, Roger Ebert called Margot Channing Bette Davis's best, greatest role. Since its release, All About Eve has been considered one of the greatest movies ever made, with special attention paid to the screenplay and Bette Davis's performance.
It's one of the best screenplays I've ever. I said that last night.
Yeah.
I said it's one of the best screenplays I've ever watched. Like, there's so much packed into it.
It's very dense.
It's moving. It's always moving. It reminded me of like an early season of Game of Thrones, where like there's a lot of political intrigue. Everybody has their own sort of angle. Everybody's double talking.
I was a little nervous because 2 of the men look very similar.
Yeah.
But it ended up not mattering so much, and I find it almost to be kind of like funny because it's like, you know, it's always like, oh, all the women look alike.
The men are interchangeable here.
The men here are completely interchangeable.
Well, the men
not
aren't.
Addison, but the 2 other guys.
Addison is the one that is like the power dealer. So it's like, of course, he's the one.
He's the one who won the Oscar.
He is.
So
I don't know. I didn't watch the other like nominees, but he deserves it. He was great.
At first, I was like, oh, so this is like a supporting role, like barely anything. But then he had a lot more to do later on.
Yeah.
All About Eve is a cult classic among the LGBT community because of
it makes sense.
Betty Davis, obviously. And it is on AFI's best movies list. I think it was at 18 in their first list of best movies.
Is it on Sight and Sound?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't know. My guess would be no.
Okay. Because it's not artsy enough?
Yeah, exactly. But it's still, is seen as one of the best. And I really liked it. I thought it was a good one.
I thought it was excellent.
It is in black and white.
It is.
And they do talk like, hey, they're a buster.
All About Eve is number 211 because they did the top 250.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It's the screenplay is like old school Hollywood where it's like, nobody talks like this.
Yes.
Like I've never heard a human being say any of these words before.
But you know why it works? Because they're all actors.
Yeah. Right,
everybody in the movie is an actor or a writer or a director.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, they don't talk like that in real life, but they're all putting on a play for each other,
I also don't really mind it because a lot of
I
older
like old
movies
Hollywood.
do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
Where like they talk in ways that I'm like,
right. But if you watch a movie like Banshees of Inisherin or Moonlight or I don't know, Top Gun, like the screenplays are totally, totally different from what you have here. Like this is a totally different world from those types. Those movies are closer to each other than any of them are to this movie.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I have about All About Eve. I had to cut some stuff out about like casting because I didn't know anybody.
I did some trimming later on. I did that too.
Like I thought it was interesting that Claudette Colbert was cast at first, but like, do you know who Claudette Colbert is? I do, but
I don't.
Literally because I watched it happen one night in high school.
Frank Capra.
That's it. That's the only reason I knew who she was. All these other people that were in the casting, like so and so was considered, and I'm like,
right.
Okay. Why don't you start with the plot summary?
Okay, so I am getting over a little bit of a cold, so bear with me here. We open at a prestigious award ceremony where the celebrities of the theater world have gathered to honor one of their brightest new stars, the amazing young Eve Harrington, played by Anne Baxter, whose meteoric rise to fame is unprecedented. Looking on from the audience are many other famous thespians and figures of the theater. The well-known Bill Simpson, played by Gary Merrill, the successful playwright Lloyd Richards, played by Hugh Marlowe, and his wife Karen, played by Celeste Holm, and one of the brightest stars of Broadway, the incomparable Margot Channing, played by Bette Davis. All look upon Miss Harrington with a mixture of distaste and disgust on their faces, while off to the side sits the well-known and often reviled theater critic Addison DeWitt, played by George Sanders, who, with a bemused look on his face, begins to recount Eve's recent past. He, better than anybody else, knows all about Eve. We head back a bit in time. Margot Channing is a Broadway star who has recently turned 40 and worries about what her advancing age will mean for her career. After a performance of Margot's latest play called Aged in Wood, Margot's close friend Karen, wife of the play's author Lloyd, brings in infatuated fan Eve to meet Margot.
At this point, I was like, oh, Lord, there's too many people. But it actually got worked out pretty well.
Because they were the only people,
exactly.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Eve tells the group gathered in Margot's dressing room, again, Karen, Lloyd, and Margot's maid Bertie Coonan, played by Thelma Ritter, that she followed Margot's last theatrical tour to New York City after seeing her perform in San Francisco. She tells an engrossing story of growing up poor in Wisconsin and losing her young husband in the South Pacific during World War II. Bertie doesn't buy it. What a story, she remarks, everything but the bloodhound snapping at her rear end. Margot is moved, though, and she befriends Eve, takes her into her home, and hires her as her assistant, upsetting Bertie. Eve quickly manipulates herself into Margot's life, acting as her secretary and adoring fan. She places a long-distance phone call to Margot's boyfriend Bill when Margot forgets his birthday. Margot becomes increasingly distrustful and bitter toward Eve, particularly after she catches Eve taking a bow to an empty theater while pretending to wear Margot's costume. Holding a party for Bill's birthday, Margot gets a little too drunk and angrily abuses everyone. It's in this scene where the famous quote from the movie comes that Aaron began the episode with, "Buckle your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night." Margot asks her producer Max Fabian to hire Eve at his office, but instead Eve manages to become Margot's understudy without her knowledge. As Margot's irritation grows, Karen, on the other hand, feels sorry for Eve. And so Eve asks Karen for a favor. Could Karen possibly put in a good word for her with her playwright husband? She would love to serve as Margot's unworthy understudy in the new play that he's writing. In hopes of humbling Margot, Karen arranges for her to miss a performance so that Eve may perform in her place. Eve invites the city's theater critics to attend the performance, including the acerbic Addison DeWitt, which is a triumph for her. Later that night, after a successful performance, Eve tries to seduce Bill, again Margot's boyfriend, but he rejects her. Didn't he say something like, treat it as an incomplete forward pass or something like that?
Yeah, that was
like the
so
weirdest line.
funny. I actually like that.
Instead, Addison takes her under his wing and interviews her for a column harshly criticizing Margot for resisting younger talent. Margot and Bill announce their engagement at dinner with Lloyd and Karen. Eve summons Karen to the ladies' room and, after first appearing regretful, delivers an ultimatum. Karen must recommend her to Lloyd for the lead role of Cora in Lloyd's next play, or she will reveal Karen's role in Margot's missed performance. She's going to be like, I know that you mess with that car. Mm-hmm. Before Karen can talk with Lloyd, though, Margot announces to everyone's surprise that she doesn't even want to play Cora because she is too old. She's too old for it. Real Danny Glover out here. Eve is cast as Cora. Just before the premiere of the new play in New Haven, Eve presents Addison with her next plan, to marry Lloyd, whom she claims is in love with her, so that he can write plays in which she can be the star. Angered with Eve's antics, Addison reveals that he knows that her backstory is a lie. Her real name is Gertrude Slachinsky. She was never married, and she had been paid to leave town over an affair with her boss, and she had never even been to San Francisco. He also lets her know that Lloyd is not leaving Karen for her.
Not gonna happen.
With this information, Addison blackmails Eve, whom he says now belongs to him. That was a scary scene. You're an improbable person, Eve, he says, but so am I. We have that in common. Also a contempt for humanity, an inability to love or be loved, insatiable ambition, and talent. We deserve each other, he says. Finding her own manipulations turned against her, Eve is forced to accept DeWitt's terms, and so she collapses on the bed in tears. Months later, Eve is a Broadway star headed for Hollywood at the awards banquet from the beginning of the movie. A recipient of an award, Eve thanks Margot, Bill, Lloyd, and Karen, while all four stare back at her coldly. No, they're just like... Eve skips a party in her own honor and returns home, where she encounters Phoebe, a teenage fan who had slipped into her apartment and fallen asleep. Phoebe, her chosen name, as she admits, not her real name.
Well, I call myself Phoebe.
Professes her adoration and tries to insinuate herself into Eve's life, offering to pack Eve's trunk for Hollywood. Eve invites her to stay the night rather than take the long trip back to Brooklyn by subway. While Eve rests, Addison knocks on the door and Phoebe answers, and he hands Phoebe her award. Addison sees that Phoebe will play the same role in Eve's life that Eve has played in so many others' lives, particularly Margot. After Addison leaves, Eve asks who was at the door, and Phoebe lies and says it was a taxi driver. Phoebe, then out of sight of Eve, wears the elegant robe that Eve wore to the banquet and poses in front of a 3-paned mirror, holding the award and bowing. Mm-hmm. All about Eve.
Yeah, man. That was a really good ending.
Yeah, it's a great ending. You kind of see, like, the way that the mirror is set up, you see, like, hundreds of Phoebes in the mirror, and it's like, this is going to keep happening and happening and happening and happening. And there's so many of these people out there.
I like that. I thought that, before I saw it, I thought Bette Davis was Eve.
I didn't know.
But, because I thought it's all about her.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But it wasn't.
Neither of them is, neither Margot nor Eve is on the screen for more than 40% of the movie.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I looked at how long they were.
But they are definitely co-leads, for sure.
I would say so. I mean, if there ever was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Here is my discussion. I basically only have questions and a couple comments.
Okay.
So, my first question deals with the Oscar nominations. Now, you said that the guy who played Addison, what is he, a reporter?
George Sanders, yeah.
That he deserved to win the Oscar. There were 4 nominations among women. So, you have Bette Davis, who played Margot. You have Anne Baxter, who played Eve. You had Celeste Holm, who was Karen. And you had Thelma Ritter, who played Birdie. And so Karen, remember, is the playwright's wife. And she's like the friend who kind of gets involved, kind of meddles a little. And Birdie is Margot, Bette Davis's
like assistant.
Housekeeper, things like that. And she's like a tough talking kind of girl.
Old broad.
Yeah. Which women would you have given the Oscar to?
Bette Davis. That's it.
You wouldn't have given the...
No.
Wow.
Well, Birdie, again, I don't know the competition. So I'm going to preface it with that. But Birdie wasn't in the movie enough, first of all.
But it is a supporting role.
But Karen's role was more substantial. There was more meat in that role.
Okay.
Birdie's role is... She got this nomination in part because she was an older, respected actress that I don't believe had been nominated to this point.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a Jamie Lee Curtis thing if Jamie Lee Curtis didn't win.
Yeah.
Where I think it was sort of just a nod to her. She ended up being nominated like 4 times or something.
Yeah, and I think she won a Tony too.
Yeah, so I think it was kind of like that type of deal. Home would have been fine. Celeste Holm. I don't know. It didn't wow me, her role.
I agree.
I thought it was an interesting little middle ground type of character, but she was there. It felt like to be a plot device, to be the one
she's a total plot device
who got upset and screwed over Margot.
Yeah.
And
no real personality, to be honest.
Yeah, she hated Bette Davis, Celeste Holm.
Really?
Yeah, you
can't really tell that.
A lot of Bette Davis's female co-stars hated her in her movies.
She treated them like nothing.
She said that during the award season when Anne Baxter was nominated for lead actress with her. No, sorry, this was before this. This was when the movie first came together, and people knew the movie was about a young actress usurping an older actress. And so the media tried to make a thing about Anne Baxter and Bette Davis having a feud and all this stuff. And not only did they not have a feud, like they really liked each other, but every day on set, when Anne Baxter walked by Davis would go at her like as a joke about how they like hate each other.
That's funny.
Yeah, so there was no feud there, but the media tried to make it out like it was going to be like a real life All About Eve thing.
Yeah.
And so the problem with here was what I alluded to before with Best Lead Actress. Them both being nominated, there's a couple of theories that they took the vote from each other. That Gloria Swanson and Bette Davis took the vote from each other.
Possible.
And so it all ended up however way it like kind of shook out. It was Judy Holliday that ended up winning. And it's funny because the movie that she was in, I keep forgetting what it's called. She basically played like a dumb blonde, and she goes to Washington, and it's like really it's like kind of like a pro-America movie. But for some reason people thought it was communist. And so she had a lot of communism, like allegations too, because she was Jewish, and her name, I forget what her last name was, but it wasn't Holiday. She changed it for, it was whatever Holiday means in Hebrew is her last name. And so there was this whole swirling thing around that too, but she was the one that ended up pulling it out. However, the vote shook out between Swanson and Baxter and Davis.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
You would have given it to Bette Davis out of the two?
I would have to rewatch Sunset Boulevard.
No. I mean, out of her and Anne Baxter.
Yeah.
Why?
Because she played a more vibrant character.
She's iconic.
Eve is an interesting character, but Eve is a snake. You know Eve. Like
you've seen it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought Anne Baxter played it really well.
Yeah, she did fine. But
she also pushed to be in lead. The original idea was for her to be in supporting, but she didn't want to compete against both her co-stars.
Yeah.
And afterwards, in her memoir or whatever, she said, that was a big mistake of mine. I should have gone for the supporting.
She probably would have won.
And Bette Davis said, she's right.
Why would you go up against Betty?
Bette Davis is great, man.
It's so funny that you said we had the same questions on favorite showbiz movies.
Yeah, I actually didn't even think about it.
So I wrote some down, so that's perfect. So do you have any favorite showbiz movies?
Well, I mean, the immediate ones that come to mind are this, Sunset Boulevard, and Mulholland Drive are the first 3 that come to mind.
And those are 3 that I didn't write down because I knew that you were going to talk about them.
Right.
Yeah.
La La Land. I really like.
Yeah, La La Land's really good.
I feel like people are a little mixed on La La Land. I really liked it. I loved it.
I loved it. I cried. I loved it.
I really liked it the first time, even though I was pulling for Moonlight when we watched it.
Yeah.
But when we rewatched it like a couple years
really
ago,
good.
I loved it.
Yeah. It's a very well done movie.
Yeah.
And Babylon apparently is about Hollywood too.
Oh, we got to start Babylon.
Which
And by start, I mean it's 3 hours, so we're definitely not doing it in one night.
Do you want to know some of the movies I picked about show business?
Yeah, go for it.
The first one I thought I was The Greatest Showman.
Oh my god.
Is Circus.
There's a sucker
that
born
count?
every minute.
Singing in the Rain is one of my favorite movies.
Okay. I watched it with you, but I have to rewatch
It is one of my favorite movies. Adaptation.
Yeah, he's a screenwriter.
He's a screenwriter.
Yeah.
Adaptation's wild.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Just go watch Adaptation.
I feel like if we did that, the summary portion would be like 2 hours long. Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping. That's
Oh
about
yeah, of course.
showbiz.
That's one of our favorites.
Yeah. This is Spinal Tap for
Yes.
getting into mockumentaries about
Yes.
show business. I love Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago was good.
Such a good musical.
I watched it for the first time with you last year or something.
It's great.
Yeah, it was fun.
And I just went a little off board here. We watched it a couple years ago. Dolomite Is My Name.
Yeah.
It's about the making of a movie.
Yeah.
And it was just like a rollicking good time. It's an Eddie Murphy comeback. I feel like Eddie Murphy has like 5,000 comebacks.
Yeah.
This is an Eddie Murphy comeback.
He has a
movie.
comeback like every other year.
And it's just really fun. It's one of those movies that isn't going to make you sad or mad or have to think too much.
Yeah.
It's just fun and light, and I loved it. So lots of good show business movies out there.
I clicked on the first link on Google, and number 1 is Sunset Boulevard, and number 2 is All About Eve.
Yeah. I mean, and it's fun too.
And number
because
3 is 8.5 by Fellini, which I've seen, which is like about him making his. It's basically almost an adaptation thing where like he didn't really know what to do for his next movie, so he just sort of just threw his own experience out there.
Yeah.
And like his writer's block.
Yeah.
And it became a movie that is like apparently like it's
One of the
people
best.
receive it as one of the best of all time.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because a lot of showbiz movies that come out either were made in like the 40s or 50s
Yeah.
or take place in the 40s or 50s or look like the 40s or 50s. Like
Yeah.
La La Land doesn't take place in the 50s, but it looks 50s-esque.
I mean,
you know?
every now and then you get something where it's like it's a little bit later than the 50s, but you get like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, that was also
Which
on
was-
like every
which
list. And
was
I'm like,
what, 60s,
I'm
70s?
not writing this down.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
I didn't love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood the first time I saw it, and then I watched it over somebody's shoulder with no sound on a plane, and I really liked it.
I just couldn't do it.
I was like, oh, I remember that part. That was awesome.
Early 70s, I think, because that's when
Yeah, the Manson
the
stuff was
Manson
going on.
stuff happened.
Yeah, I'm on IMDb right now, so yeah, there's a lot of these, a lot of ones that I haven't seen, like King of Comedy.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. That's what like Joker's based on.
Basically. Oh, wait a minute. Oh my God. What about Tropic Thunder?
Yeah, I didn't write that one down. But I like that movie.
It is about showbiz.
It has flaws, but
It does have flaws.
I do like it, and I understand that you have to put context in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be wrong. some of
Robert
the stuff
Downey
that's
Jr. is
there.
in blackface. That's
Yeah.
wrong. The character plays it as if it's wrong.
It's supposed to be wrong.
He is the idiot. He is the villain.
Right.
Like he's a moron.
Ben Stiller takes a specific role
Yes.
that is not a good,
Ableist.
It's Forrest Gump-esque.
It is and it's poking fun at Forrest Gump and I Am Sam.
Exactly. And again, it's done with that purpose to skewer
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
And I find it funny. I think it's a little too vulgar.
It is.
But it's a funny movie.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Any other ones that you
And I
think
can
of?
understand people being upset by both of those things.
And that's totally valid. too.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely valid.
Yes. Yes. No, I would say those are the ones that I saw.
Cool. So what are some like old movies that you like? Because this was our first old movie.
Just old movies.
Oh yeah, think about like old movies.
Citizen Kane is legit one of the greatest movies of all time.
That was when we first were like, ooh, I might like him. It was like over a Citizen Kane thing.
Yeah, because I was a freaking nerd.
Because I was like, oh, I like Citizen Kane. You should watch it. Because I watched a lot of movies in high school. I was like really cool. Because I had no friends that didn't go out. And you watched the first 6 minutes and did like commentary over it and then sent it on Facebook.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
You still have it?
I'm sure it's on my Facebook. I am absolutely sure it's on my Facebook. Yeah, Citizen Kane rocks.
It's like I rewatched it a few months ago. Man, it's amazing.
All right, let's do like maybe someone's listening here, like even if it's like Kaylee, who like maybe she's like, oh, I always want to get into old movies and see like what these classics are, but like I don't know where to start. I don't want to be like bored. What's like a solid couple of movies that are old, black and white or not, that are like really really good even for today's audience.
How old are we talking? Like, are we talking
I would say pre-60s.
pre-60s? I'm gonna be honest, I haven't seen all that many from pre-60s.
I know.
But I'm
But
going
there's a
on my
couple
Letterboxd
that are
page right now.
Really good. So to me, what stands out, Singing in the Rain is a really, really good movie.
12 Angry Men.
I haven't seen 12 Angry Men.
It's awesome.
And my absolute, it might be my favorite movie, Tom.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm going to say? Some Like It Hot.
Okay.
Some Like It Hot might be my favorite movie ever.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It is so funny. It is kind of musical-esque, but it's more about the comedy aspect.
Yeah.
And the two leads are amazing. It's just the best movie.
I've got a couple more. I've got Rear Window.
That was great.
Hitchcock.
I loved Rear Window.
Basically, the guy he's got a broken leg, and it's is it Jimmy Stewart?
No.
No. Why am I blanking on who it is?
It's not Jimmy Stewart. Oh, It's a Wonderful
Life. No,
Life.
It is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, and Grace Kelly's in it.
Yeah, Grace Kelly's so beautiful.
And he's like looking out his back window, his rear window, and he like does he see the murder?
He thinks he sees a murder.
He thinks he sees a murder, and it's kind of about his mindset as he's trying to like solve this murder from his room with a broken leg.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's a psychological kind of thriller.
It's a Wonderful Life is also amazing.
It's a Wonderful Life.
That's
on the waterfront.
Oh, On the Waterfront's great. That's Marlon Brando. It's Ellie Kazan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If we want to go into like,
I could have been a contender.
I've been watching a lot of old Japanese movies, and Akira Kurosawa's Ikiru, which is like, it was just remade into Living, the movie Living. It's just a really sweet. It's a movie about appreciating the little things in life.
Beautiful.
And it is a beautiful movie. Has some of the most iconic images, iconic shots in movie history. We've also got, Sunset Boulevard is one of them. It's awesome. What else? And there's a whole, like I said, I'm not like super well versed in this, this time period really. I'm looking at the 50s right now.
Roman Holiday's really good.
Mm-hmm.
That one's excellent.
I loved Touch of Evil, which is another Orson Welles movie.
There you go.
Which again has some questionable things in it because Charlton Heston for some reason is playing a Mexican guy. But just the filmmaking aspects of it, the tension building. There's a whole like tracking shot in the first scene where there's like a car bomb that you're like, oh my god, is this gonna blow up and kill everybody?
Yeah, that's really good.
It's like taught in film schools, like because of how great it was. That's what I got from the 50s. I'm just gonna go back to the 40s real quick. I have even less from the 40s, but just to see if there's anything. Oh, Rebecca.
I still haven't seen Rebecca.
Amazing murder mystery. Rebecca's not in the movie. Just about her. She's like, it's like her ghost hangs over the movie.
Love that.
With like the new girl that's there.
Ooh.
I watched a bunch of these movies in my mysteries and literature class in high school. Double Indemnity, Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, I watched It Happen One Night and Roman Holiday in my journalism class.
Yeah.
Because there were journalists in the movie. It Happened One Night is really good too. That's one of the three. This is like, I swear to God, this better be a trivia question because at trivia tomorrow, because this is my did you know question.
By the time this comes out, we will have won trivia.
We'll see. Where there's been only 3 movies of all ever that have won the big 5: actor, actress, director, screenplay, and picture. And It Happened One Night was the first. Then it was One Flew Over the
the Coco's Nest.
The Cocoa Puffs Nest. And then the last one is Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, which is kind of a crock of garbage. That
because
Hopkins being for lead actor
like
is insane.
So it was 1934, 1975, 1991.
Who won for supporting actress for Cuckoo's Nest?
It wasn't supporting. It's not supporting. It's only lead actor and actress,
duh,
and that's Jodie Foster, obviously.
Right. Yes, right.
And if someone was going to win, it would have been Erica Christensen, who later would be in Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, there you go.
But I don't even know if she was nominated. I don't think she was.
Yeah, I don't know.
There you go. So yeah, It Happened One Night is a really good old movie.
Yeah.
Then do you know what's really good? The Great Dictator.
Yes.
Charlie Chaplin.
There's some others, like a couple other Fellini movies that I talked about. La Strada's great, which is another like kind of showbiz movie. It's like a circus movie, but his stuff is really down to earth. It's about his movies are kind of about the common Italian person, like post-war Italian person. So it's like you get a lot of insight to it's people that are very relatable.
Yeah,
And their
I like
emotions that to that point hadn't been on screen because they
Yeah.
were all it's like big stars.
Yeah.
These people aren't big stars. They were like unknown actors
Yeah.
in most of his movies. So he's got a whole bunch that you can just go check out. I've seen probably like 3 or 4 of them. And I think that's a great list. Like that's a great crop.
Perfect. Yeah. I
And
love
we haven't
it.
even we're not even that well versed.
We are not at all well versed in this at all.
Yeah.
So, now that we're on the topic of old movies, there are distinct differences. Like if you watch a movie from 1950s, 1940s, you know that you're going to get into something different than if you watch a movie from after that.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
the 60s until today.
I would say from the 70s on for sure.
So, what do you find are some of the positives of older movies? I mean, obviously with newer movies, especially in the past 10, 15 years, so much more diversity, so many more other people's stories that are being told that weren't told.
Yes.
Back in the day. You have obviously much better like CGI.
Well, that's one of my things.
You have stories that are a lot of times more complex and that are more progressive and take more chances. There's so many more movies out there nowadays that like you can find anything you want.
I would actually disagree with the fact that they take more chances.
Oh,
I don't
saucy.
think
Not than the 70s. The 70s were a freewheeling time.
I don't think that today's movies don't take chances. I just think that these movies were taking chances. Like I said, this movie is a big chance.
Yeah, sure.
Sunset Boulevard's a big chance. Citizen Kane took down the biggest journalist in the country.
Yeah.
Like these movies were subversive. These movies were attacking authority and the authority that was governing them. Like in this case, you know, and even Citizen Kane, where like William Randolph Hearst like sank that movie and it didn't win anything because he sank it. And he had like a large scale media campaign against it.
Yeah.
And so like we might look at this now and be like, oh yeah, it's an aging actress, whatever, it's kind of dated. But like for the time, this was like people were like, they weren't making movies like this.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the other things that you like about older movies that maybe you don't see nowadays as much?
I think that because of the technological limitations, because of the fact that they didn't have CGI and they didn't have drones and they didn't have things like that, there was a lot more focus on the craft of camera angles and on sound and on like the technical aspects that they had to get right because they didn't have any other options.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot to do. It's much harder to do post-production on film than it is on digital. So the fact that these people were working, like you're looking at, I'm thinking of some of the Akira Kurosawa stuff I've been watching, like, and the Ozu stuff, like everything, they have this very specific style to them. And I find that watching movies today, it's a little bit more, everybody kind of shares the techniques. Like there's like, it's really hard to find today directors with certain specific styles.
Yeah.
Like I think Jordan Peele has a specific style. I can't really explain that style, but I know a Jordan Peele movie when I see it.
Yeah.
But I think that because there's so many movies and because there's so much technology and so many techniques and all this stuff, and it makes you think that it would splinter off and there would be all these different like crazy different things that are going on. But I feel like the limitations made it almost more unique. So like movies don't look like All About Eve anymore.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, one way or another, but like I think there's been a lost art of using space and using camera angles in certain ways. Now, that's not to say that nobody does it because there's great directors.
Yeah.
But and of course I'm selectively going back and watching the greatest movies from the 50s and 60s and all that. So I'm not saying that every movie in the 50s and 60s was expertly using all these techniques, but I think that those are some, like, the focus is less on that in current movies and more on the, like you said, the progressiveness of the stories and the kind of the more, in terms of the technical aspects, the more pushing the boundaries on CGI and things like that, which there's plenty to be said for that. I think that there's nothing wrong with pushing the boundaries of visual effects.
Shout out Avatar 2.
Right, but last night we watched The Fly, which is not 1960s, 1950s.
86.
It was 86, and it's everything. And there's no CGI in that movie.
Right.
It's David Cronenberg. It's body horror. It's everything is a costume or makeup or something. And I think that there's a lot of that's been lost along the way too, because it's much easier to go and have your computer people work on CGI than it is to have prosthetics and people that are working day and night on little things. Like I think you do see that though, like in The Last of Us, all of the zombies or the infected are prosthetics and like makeup people.
Yeah. So
that's another thing that has been sort of changed in the way that it works for the most part. I'm not saying that the balance or the trade-off is any better or worse. But yeah, those are a few things that I think were better in the early days.
It is interesting that you say that, because there are like some like little tricks and tips that happened in old school movies that are still kind of like famous today. The one that comes to mind is in 1942's Casablanca. Ingrid Bergman, right? That's her name?
Who was considered for Margot.
Really?
Yeah.
She always looked like she was on the verge of tears.
Yeah.
And they did that like with like they always shone a light in her eyes or something. So you always saw that kind of sheen, and that is really shows a depth of characterization that like you wouldn't see otherwise. It really makes you think.
And when
I
talk
about her,
and that's a good point. So that's like when I talk about the camera angles that the Japanese directors were using, the way, like for example, Ozu shoots all his movies stationary, camera doesn't move. They're almost all family dramas, so like they're in houses,
play-esque,
but they switch sets, so like it's not all like one house, but like the camera's very low to the ground, and so it's supposed to give you the perspective of sitting on a mat, like Japanese people sit on a mat and sit and talk to each other, so that you're seeing them from that.
And you're part of that conversation.
And you're part of the conversation. So it's not just the fact of different camera angles and different perspectives. It's what does that tell you about the story and about the characters and about the symbols and the themes and everything. And really, really expert directors couldn't rely on. It was much more of a show, not tell situation because of the limitations of the technology.
Yeah.
And again, I'm watching the greatest directors of all time.
Course.
So I'm holding like women talking to the standard of people who are considered the greatest of all time. So it's like, it's not really a fair balance, but
I do think though, like sometimes I'll like be about to watch a black and white movie. I'll be like, oh, black and white. But I gotta say, whenever I watch like a newer black and white movie, I like love that choice.
Yeah.
And I feel like it does so much. Like Roma to me could not have been in color.
Yeah.
Like I loved that it was in black and white.
Roma took place in the time of black and white movies. Did it not? Because it was like his, it was Alfonso Cuarón's childhood. So that makes sense why he would show a retrospective film from then and have it in black and white.
Tragedy of Macbeth is another one that like it could not have been in color.
No,
it just couldn't have been.
And what I loved about that one, I think that was, I don't forget the director of that movie. Oh, was it Joel Coen?
Yeah, it was Coen.
Yeah, it was one of the Coens. And they used smoke really well. And the shading of I mean, I'm colorblind, so all I see is black, white, and gray. But that's what the movie was.
No.
And I agree with it. And it was very like claustrophobic. You felt like you were Macbeth being closed in on.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
I said that so much of this is still relevant today. All About Eve.
Oh yeah.
Like for example, they called reviewers, to come and see the one show that Margot wasn't at. Right. It's kind of like when Hailey Bieber calls the paparazzi, oh, hey, I'm going to be at Sir.
Yeah.
Make sure you're outside kind of thing. It's just interesting to me. And then my last note, I said, I am shook by the personal lives of these actors.
Oh, man. That's what a lot of the book chapters were about.
Only one of them out of like all the main people was married once.
Was it Birdie?
It was Birdie.
Thelma Ritter is
She
her
was
name?
married till death, baby.
Yeah.
Everybody else had like
mad spouses.
Celeste Holm, girl, Karen, girl. Hold on, Celeste Holm. First of all, My queen. Hold on, my Wikipedia is not loading.
Just a side note. You know what else is BS? When people are like, "Oh, everything in Hollywood is so political nowadays." Did you not hear me talking about the way that they were literally using war propaganda? That they were not only were they promoting war propaganda, they were contracted by the military. The military was getting editing cuts of some of these movies.
Yeah.
Like, that's as political as it gets. This has always been what Hollywood has been. Hollywood has always been political.
Always.
It's always been art always pushes boundaries. And I would rather an art that pushes boundaries to an art that is being controlled by a war machine.
Mm-hmm. So Celeste Holm was married 5 times.
Queen.
Her son, Ted Nelson, is an internet pioneer.
Okay. Oh, Ted Nelson. What was he involved in?
Hypertext.
Yeah.
And hypermedia.
Yeah.
And Project
I don't know what that is.
Xanadu.
I thought he was somebody else.
Yeah, well, he is like a big tech guy. And then she also, when she was 87, she married a 41-year-old opera singer. But I think there were like dementia issues.
Yeah.
And like there were issues.
He wanted the money or whatever.
Maybe one of those situations. So that's Celeste Holm. Wild. And then, okay, the other, Anne Baxter. She played Eve. She was married 3 times. And she's the one who is Frank Lloyd Wright's granddaughter.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
And
famous
I was
architect.
Like, oh, wow. She was very political.
Yeah. She was.
She sure was.
So was Bette Davis.
But
yes.
you know.
Yes.
And Bette Davis was married 4 times, like you said.
She had a big struggle between being a star and a wife and a mom.
Yeah.
And she ultimately found out that a wife was not for her.
Okay, this is kind of wild. So, George Sanders, who played
Bill? No, Addison.
Addison and won the Oscar. He was married
like 1 million times.
4 times.
Yeah.
One was to Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Yes.
He married her sister.
Really?
Magda.
During this
for like 2 seconds.
During the filming of this movie, he was with Zsa Zsa Gabor, and she would come to the set all the time during his scenes with Marilyn because she didn't trust him.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then he married Magda Gabor 32 days. That was it. And it's like, could you just not? Like,
yeah, instead of doing that, just don't.
He had problems. He died by suicide.
He did. Do you know what his note said? That was in my book.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. That's sad.
Yeah, it is.
And then who else we got here? Gary Merrill, who was
he was
only
Bill.
Bette Davis's husband.
Yeah.
He only married twice, and his last one was Bette Davis. A lot of these people died young.
They did.
He was 74, but
that's
And then Hugh Marlowe, he married 3 times, but at least the 3rd one stuck, so that was pretty good. And then of course you've got your Marilyn Monroe, who she was married 3 times.
We know. From our favorite film.
Enough Blonde. First of all, let her rest. Can we not make any more movies about her? Seriously, unless they're documentaries. I don't mind a documentary, but Jesus.
Let's not make that movie.
Something that was like super interesting to me was Arthur Miller. I don't know if you realize was mentioned.
Yep.
And that was before she had even married Joe DiMaggio. So she did not marry Arthur Miller.
I did catch that reference actually.
Before then, which I thought was kind of funny. So I just found I know very little, it turns out, about like old Hollywood and famous people, because I swear to God,
you should read the book when I'm done with it.
Every time I click on a new actor or actress, it was like, this actress was nominated for 7 Oscars.
Times.
I'm like,
well, but you got to think back then the crop was a lot.
Yeah, there
tighter,
weren't a lot.
So
of
there
movies.
wasn't as many.
Yeah, but it's like they all married each other, and they all like, it was crazy, and they all had major issues.
Yep.
Literally, like everybody had major issues.
And they
except
all were
Birdie.
And they all were jerked around by the producers, who were the worst people on the sets.
Yeah, totally. So that's what I have. I do have some answers to some of your questions.
Okay. So my first question is, what did you think of the framing of this movie? So it starts out at the banquet.
Yeah.
And you get Addison as the narrator, and he's narrating each person, telling you who they are.
Karen becoming the narrator at some point. Karen becomes the narrator too.
Yeah, it's like it was a weird little structure. And Eve is clearly the alpha in that scene.
Yes.
And then it cuts it's almost like a cold open.
Yeah.
And it cuts, and then you're her as she sees Karen coming out of the theater where Margot's in the theater to help her sort of meet Margot.
Yeah.
And then it shows her rise, not really from her perspective, but from Margot's perspective.
Yeah.
So what did you have any opinion about that, or did you...
I found if I were to have any like, that's kind of weird criticism about it, it's the shifting of all the different perspectives did become a little bit confusing. I can understand maybe the purpose, because I find that has to be purposeful, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
The purpose being like, you know, there's so many different sides to different stories, and everybody thinks they're so important in this story.
You already know where the story's going.
Right. So I understand that, but I was like, oh, why is Karen doing a voiceover right now?
Right.
Like, that's kind of weird. But overall, like, I like the structure of like showing something and then going back in time. And
you're probably wondering how I got here.
I like that. Yeah, which we don't see that much anymore.
Because it became a meme.
Yeah. But I like the way that it's done.
I agree. I think it's more effective than a chronological. Like, it adds a little bit of an
because you know where it's headed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just want to know
the movie's called All About
there.
Eve. You know where it's headed. You know that she's going to become like a star, or she's going to do something.
It's super interesting too, because it's like you're kind of like, okay, but it's not really because Bette Davis is there, but it kind of is all about Eve.
Yeah, it is. From that second she walks in that door. Remember in that first scene where Bette Davis is like, "Oh, I only have one of my earrings," or whatever. Yeah. I think Eve stole that one of her earrings.
Probably.
I think that was like a little thing that they slid in there. It's
I'm
like
sure.
even at that point, Eve was
shady.
She was
from the start.
She was. What's your Mount Rushmore of best pictures that you've seen?
Okay, I wrote this down. You're gonna be like, what? I went through all the best pictures. Turns out I have not seen enough of them. Definitely need to watch more. Here's my Mount Rushmore. In no order. I'm just gonna go backwards chronologically.
Okay.
Parasite.
Okay.
Moonlight. Silence of the Lambs. And Rocky.
And Rocky. Was that 1976?
Yes.
Okay.
And Rocky. You gotta go with Rocky.
I would say I largely agree with you.
Really?
I agree on Parasite and I agree on Moonlight.
Can I give you my reasons?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I feel like each one of these movies changed cinema, and for the better. I think.
Do you think Parasite did?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it did, because there's a lot more focus on foreign films. Yeah.
110%.
Yeah.
So I find that Parasite really opened the door
because I haven't seen
foreign language films.
Because I haven't seen another movie like Parasite since. I guess there have been some like facsimiles, like Triangle of Sadness kind of was.
Yeah. But Parasite is very singular in that I think that there's no movie like it. I think it's honestly one of the best movies ever made.
I agree.
But it really opened...
Though I do love Memories of Murder when it comes to Bong Joon-ho's other movies.
Memories of Murder slaps, first of all. But okay. Parasite opened the door to quite a few different things. One of them is kind of not sticking to one genre.
Yeah.
Which I think more movies are doing now.
With
less success.
With mixed success.
But people are trying it.
Yeah, because it takes...
Everything Everywhere is like
Yeah,
that.
oh yeah. It's just so hard to stick the landing.
Yeah.
The way Parasite did.
It really opens the door for more non-English films.
Yeah, that is 100% true.
Which, since Parasite, we have seen so many more be considered for awards season, so many more that have entered into the public consciousness in the United States.
What did Bong Joon-ho say? Don't let the 1 inch of text bar you from however many, a whole world, whole new world.
It's so true. We watch subtitles on...
on English movies,
Shark Tank.
Yeah, exactly. Jeopardy.
Yeah.
No, that's the one thing we turn it off for.
We turn it off for Jeopardy. And I also think that it really kickstarts, again, maybe mixed things here, but that the social message of the ultra rich and doing the satirical take down the rich kind of thing,
which has been highly prevalent these last couple of years.
Very prevalent the past few years. Oh, also that makes me think, I wanted to say this like little joke, how
Get ready.
It's not funny.
Oh.
Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve were the Friends with Benefits and No Strings Attached of its time.
Or The Prestige and The Illusionist.
Where it's like there's always those two movies that come out at the same year and you're like, dude, did you guys not talk?
Yeah.
Like you should have done it, a year later.
Well, it's funny because they are obviously, you're being facetious, but like
it happens all the time.
They're very different because in Sunset Boulevard, it's like we're past the end. We're like Margot Channing in 15 years. is Sunset Boulevard. So it's like there's a little bit of a twist, but I get what you're saying.
But well, Friends with Benefits and No Strings Attached. One of them has Justin Timberlake, and the other has Ashton Kutcher. So they're very different.
Right, of course, of course.
Okay, so that's Parasite. Moonlight. I mean, we got A24 won how many awards?
Yeah,
a bajillion awards this Oscar season, and A24 is the production company that their first Best Picture win was with Moonlight. Their second was just with Everything Everywhere. But
it didn't win in between.
I don't think so. I think I read that fact.
Yeah.
But there's been an explosion of movies that use Moonlight's aesthetic. You know what I mean?
And most of them are A24 movies.
And most of them are A24 movies. In the physical look of the movie.
You know what movie comes to mind? Cha-Cha Real Smooth comes to mind.
It's very much in the same aesthetic. Waves.
Yes.
Very
well,
much.
Waves,
Zola.
Waves is like
so many movies that
and those
have,
are all A24.
Yeah, that have that same kind of look
Cha-Cha
to
wasn't,
them.
but
no.
yeah.
That was Amazon, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, Moonlight really opens the door to other stories being told, which I really like.
Yeah. And it's truly an epic. It's not 3 hours long.
No.
But it's truly an epic story of a person's life.
It's an excellent movie.
In 3 parts.
Silence of the Lambs, of course. I mean, you don't get you don't get things like The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
And you don't get horror being so like big now. And prestige horror, I don't think you get without Silence of the Lambs. You don't get Zodiac. You don't get the Ari Aster movies. Because Silence of the Lambs really did open up this idea that like, oh, I know it's some people call it thriller and not horror, but like thrillers and horror and that kind of genre can be nominated for awards.
Yeah.
So
not that any of the Aster movies were or anything like that.
But they should have been. So that's big to me. And finally, Rocky just rocks, dude. Rocky, there's a statue in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Like Sylvester Stallone, I know he's done tons of stuff. What's he known for? Rocky.
Yeah.
I know Rambo, blah, 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 blah. I know.
Right.
Rocky. It's
Rocky.
Rocky. It's Rocky.
There wasn't a Rambo 3 that just came out.
If
with,
you play
with Rambo's
right.
protege
Exactly.
against,
Jonathan
Majors.
It changed sports movies. It gave you that twist ending, that fake you out ending that we get constantly.
Which I haven't even
now.
seen the movie and I know the ending.
Now, it's almost like if you don't have that ending in nowadays, that's a surprise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm just gonna give a spoiler here. Rocky loses at the end, and it was shocking in the 70s.
Yeah.
It was absolutely shocking. And now, if you have it where the main character wins, you're gonna like, oh shoot.
Yeah.
Like that's different.
Well, the way movies approach it now is that the competition doesn't really matter.
Right.
Like it's about the character, it's about something else.
And with Rocky, that was the first kind of thing where it was like really, I think, focused on that. And it's just sports movies. It's the best sports movie ever, I think, personally. So
not
I
the
go
replacements?
with, maybe not. So those are my top 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with those.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on Parasite and on Moonlight. I will give you this one. Again, this is Mount Rushmore.
You're going to do The Godfather.
Mount Rushmore of the ones I've seen, not necessarily my favorites.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings, Return of the King.
Ugh.
It won every single award it was up for.
It's so long. It's boring.
It's so
boring,
long,
boring.
but it shows that a blockbuster can do everything.
I like that.
A blockbuster can be everything that it can satisfy the audiences, it can satisfy the critics, it can satisfy the Academy, it can satisfy the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, it can satisfy the critics' choice. It could do everything, and it's something that is push the boundaries of
what elves can do.
What elves can do. Not only that, but the way that battle scenes are filmed, the way that sort of visual effects were added to this was a whole new level when it came out. Like the whole Lord of the Rings series, and acknowledging Return of the King, which I do think is the best book and the best movie. It just did, I think, a lot for blockbuster movies which don't need that much because they make all this money. I think there should be more of a priority on artsier movies because they don't make money.
Yeah, but there's something to be said for like rewarding blockbuster movies that are also really good
And influential.
so that more people make good blockbuster movies.
I'm not crapping on blockbusters at all. That's kind of my point, is that I think it's important to recognize the big blockbusters, but like
Top Gun, Maverick,
right.
baby.
So I think I would put that up there, and I would put The Godfather, of course, because it's the greatest movie ever made.
Okay.
Watch The Godfather. Nobody's seen The Godfather.
I've
anymore.
seen it.
The most non-Italians haven't seen The Godfather.
Did you know
The
Diane
Godfather,
Keaton's in that?
The Godfather is like the movie that people lie about seeing the most. Like there was some like poll. It was like
Yeah, because nobody's gonna admit to not seeing that.
Yeah.
I feel like it's that in like Star Wars.
it's the best. One is better than two. Godfather 1's better than Godfather 2.
Ooh, hot take.
It's not really a hot take, but there's a debate. And again, this is all with the caveat that
Marlon Brando was like, wasn't he?
yeah.
Do you know who I loved in that movie?
Who?
James Caan.
He was great.
He is the best.
Yeah.
Do you know who else I love
Famous.
in that movie?
What did he win? Like best New York Italian multiple times, and he
He's
was
the
like, "I'm
best.
Jewish."
He's awesome. Do you know who else I love? Fredo.
Yeah. Pacino's amazing.
Yeah, he's good.
No, you say that because you know you're expected to say that he's good. Pacino.
What? Who's expected?
Pacino
Who
is
did
incredible.
he play again?
Exactly.
No, I'm serious. Michael?
Yeah. He's the best.
Hey, Michael.
His transformation from the beginning to the end of that
He's
movie
like,
is
"Just, ah!"
amazing. What about Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes?
Who's that?
Exactly. You need to rewatch The Godfather.
It's too long.
No,
It's too long.
it flies by. Anyway,
Oh my god. I'm like, oh my god, how long's her wedding?
I love that. It's like a whole hour.
It's like
It's
so
great.
long.
It's great.
Oh my god, but the part with the I was like, shocked.
Yeah.
That is true. I will give you that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying The Godfather is bad. I'm just saying, like, all right, we get it. You're the Godfather.
It's me, The Godfather. And that was me doing Adrian Brody doing Marlon Brando in Peaky
First
Blinders.
of all, okay, Adrian Brody.
We're going
wishes-
so long on this episode right now.
What's wrong?
Is it long?
It's not bad. I feel like. Oh please! After Harry Potter.
I got a lot left.
Oh shoot! You do?
Yeah.
I thought we were just like ending it soon.
No, we got to recast.
I did. I can do that in 2 seconds.
Let's recast.
I only recasted a couple people.
Okay, go for it. I recasted a lot of people.
I only recasted the people that are nominated because those are the people we talked about.
Okay,
and nobody
so, all
cares
right.
about anything else.
So let's recast Margot.
Margot. Okay, so Margot was Bette Davis, and I wanted to go with someone who is an older actress but still very much appreciated, and then I think could give you a little something, but it's not like super obvious. It would be a little bit of a choice for her. Kate Blanchett.
First person I wrote.
Kate Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett.
That's why we're married.
You know who my backup was?
Who?
Viola Davis.
Heaven.
I
Heaven.
think she would be great.
She'd be great.
She would give you the whole
Give you
gamut
everything
of
you want.
emotions.
That's great.
Eve.
Eve. Eve is the young upstart who actually isn't really that young, but like
Yeah, she's sort of she plays like a doe type character where she's like innocent but she's really a manipulator schemer.
So I actually, now that I think about it, I don't really like my choice.
I've got two.
I said
Yeah.
Haley Steinfeld.
Okay. She's a little bit
Brash.
brash is the right word.
Yeah.
I said Anna de Armas.
Actually, she was my first thought.
I just feel like she's somebody who she gives
She's too
you,
old though. She's like in her mid-30s.
but she doesn't look like it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know.
All right.
And my other one, I also said Saoirse Ronan because that would be a twist.
I picked her for something later.
That would be a twist for her.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that she would be able to be successful at because she's great at everything.
Okay.
Karen.
Karen, I picked. That's
The friend.
The friend
Yeah.
who's a little shady.
Yeah.
Who got married like 75 times.
Yeah.
I picked Saoirse Ronan.
I picked America's friend, Judy Greer.
Yeah, sure.
Judy Greer.
I love Judy Greer. Again, a little old for the role.
Not really. Karen's a little older.
Judy Greer's in her 50s, I think.
Yeah, but she doesn't look that old.
Okay.
Again,
He's doing the Grease casting.
no, listen, again, the times have changed.
Yeah.
Older actors are older now
Okay.
than they were at this point. Like you're not going to get Margot to be 40 years old. Margot doesn't have to be 40 years old anymore.
Okay.
You know? Birdie.
Birdie's the assistant. I know we said Frances McDormand.
She's Frances McDormand.
Can I give you another name?
I mean, you can, but it's wrong.
Dolly De Leon.
Sure, but it's Frances McDormand. Dolly De Leon would be great.
She'd be great.
I also have Bill, who is Margot's boyfriend.
Didn't pick Bill. I don't care.
I put Pedro Pascal because why not?
Okay.
I also had Addison.
Okay. I had Addison.
Who'd you do?
Leslie Odom Jr.
Okay. I had Ray Fine.
Yeah.
I had Ray Fine and Daniel Kaluuya.
Sure.
I could see them both sitting at that banquet, like surveying the room.
Yeah.
Sort of like just sort of smugly. I'm thinking Daniel Kaluuya in Widows.
Always.
Like,
I'm always thinking about that.
yeah. I mean, that he's wild in that movie. I also said, why don't we also just go with Bill, Harry Styles, Eve, Florence Pugh, Margot, Olivia Wilde?
When are we getting the Don't Worry Darling Venice press tour movie? Who's going to play the spit that landed on Chris Pine?
Yeah. That's stuff, man. Let me see. We don't even have to really go through. Did you think any of the other questions were particularly good? You want to answer them?
What do you mean?
I had sent you another couple questions.
Oh, no. Those are the ones all the ones we talked about were the ones I discussed.
I thought so too. Great. So there's also something about this movie. I'm actually just going to go to my discussion. Okay, so I wrote, Bill comes into into her dressing room, Margot's dressing room, and he says, 47 minutes from now, I need to be on a plane. And I wrote, wow, this is definitely pre 9/11.
Definitely.
Let's see. I said, the pressure on these women, especially Margot, is so urgent. The men are able to sit around and debate things like the theory of the theater and the nature of writing, while Margot has like a ticking sand timer until her career is replaced by somebody else. And I think that comes across in a lot of her scenes where she's drinking and she doesn't really know how to handle it.
She's amazing.
I just wrote, I don't remember this context for this, but I wrote the quote, Bill's here, baby.
Okay, so it was when like Margot was like super upset and like she was like freaking out, and then Bill like ran from some. Oh, it was after Eve tried to seduce him, and he like brushes her off, and then he realizes, oh my god, Margot was so upset for like missing the show and being all like whatever.
Yeah,
and he runs and he's like, Bill's here, baby.
King.
The way he said that, it's like, Bill, what are you doing here? Bill, you're not really needed. You look just like Lloyd. Like, I got you confused throughout the whole movie.
I like in this movie how a lot of the plot points take place off screen. So, like, the one that I'm thinking of here is when I forget who goes to see Lloyd. Somebody goes to see Lloyd, and he's talking about making her Cora in his next play.
Yeah.
But he mentions in passing, he was like, "Oh, Eve just mentioned it in passing about the new play," and it made me think like maybe I should cast her.
Did we miss that?
Huh?
And you're like, did we miss that?
No. But I love that they didn't show that on screen because that's her manipulating him. She incepted him into being like, I'm gonna make her Cora. So it's like such a smart little thing to have another character say it.
Yeah.
Without actually showing it. It's a rare case of tell but not show.
Yeah.
Which I think is effective. Blood tests for weddings. They needed to get blood tested for the wedding.
We
didn't know that was a thing until recently.
My grandma was like, someone is going to get married, and my grandma was like, well, you have to wait 3 days to get the blood test. And I'm like, Mom, it is not 1965 anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild.
I wrote, I like that in this movie, Eve's vice is fame. It's not wealth. And she makes that very clear when she tells Addison. So Addison says something like, I'm going to make something for you paved with diamonds and gold. And she goes,
no.
Stars. Paved with diamonds and gold. You know me better than that. And he says, paved with what then? And she just goes, stars.
Stars.
She doesn't care about money. She just wants to be famous. She wants to be Margot Channing.
Yep.
Which is, I think, an important distinction to make in this context. I also wrote that I loved the script in the scene when Addison was telling her he was going to blackmail her.
Yeah.
I said, the power dynamics change again. This snake sees through the guise of the other snake. He says killer to killer, champion to champion, because he sees himself in her. I wrote, he is an acid-dripping predator circling his prey.
Wow. Major The Fly vibe.
I also wrote, he's also incredibly insecure, because there was one point where she said something and he was like, don't say that.
Yeah.
It was like something about him being something. I don't remember what she said to him. And I just wrote, I wonder what this guy's backstory is.
I love that.
Because
That's one of my favorite things about movies is when something is so well written that you're like,
yeah,
how about that guy?
this is a real person that
I
has
wonder
something
what he's
going
got
on here.
going on.
Yeah.
And
So
you don't find out. That's what I like.
right, because you don't need to. It's not all about Addison.
It's all about
You know?
Eve.
So here's what I wrote about.
Do you know what's kind of interesting? Eve, it's like nighttime, just like Margot's time as a starlet is reaching its twilight.
Well, I've got something to do with Phoebe on that as well.
English teacher vibes.
So I love after all of this that it's just a takedown of Hollywood award speeches and politics. Eve's thanking all these people. They all hate
They're
her.
like, okay.
She screwed them all over. And she's a shell of herself by that point too.
Yeah.
Like in the
it's
beginning,
sad.
she looks like she's got everything.
Full of life.
She's going to Hollywood.
so
She's going to be a
excited.
major star. Everyone loves her. But no, she's a hollow shell of herself from where she was at the beginning of the movie. She doesn't even go to the
She
after
doesn't
party.
even care.
She doesn't even go to the after party.
Yeah.
Um,
She doesn't even want the award.
yeah, exactly. And Addison's the power broker there, just sneering the whole time.
Yep.
So it twists that first scene. Like
Good stuff.
you knew where it was going, but the writing is so good that it's not what you thought it was.
Well, you think she's like so beautiful and graceful
Yeah.
and so excited to win this award.
Well, you're like, why do these people hate her? Which you do get the answer to that, but the dynamic is totally different from what you think it is.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, and it also ends in a tight loop because obviously Eve gets her own Eve by the end.
Phoebe.
And the thing about Phoebe, I looked this up because I was like,
Love the name Phoebe, by the way.
Phoebe has to be the name for a reason.
Isn't it a Greek goddess?
It's a Titan Greek god, like pre-goddess, gods and goddesses. The goddess of the bright intellect. Phoebe in Greek myth is the grandmother of Apollo and Artemis. And her symbol is the moon,
Mad old.
which is important. The moon obviously shines bright in the sky among the stars, right?
Mhm.
But why does the moon shine? It's because of other people's light. It steals other people's light. That's why it's shining and it's reflecting. Phoebe herself is a symbol of past, current, future manipulators like Eve. The moon is a great symbol for this because it goes through cycles. Eve came from nothing, your new moon. She grew brighter in the sky by stealing her entire shtick from Margot, and she used Lloyd and now Addison to get to where she is. She peaks at the awards dinner. She's the full moon. She's a full moon among the stars. But the moon's false light is, like I said, just a reflection of others. And in this case, it's just the adoration of her peers and fans. It's a symbol foreshadowing what was to come. Someday, the sun will set. There will be no more light on the moon. The light will wane. And then it will cycle back to a new moon. The next Margot, the next Eve, the next
Twilight
Phoebe,
too.
so on and so forth. The whole movie is Phoebe. It's a moon cycle.
Did you make that up?
I did.
Wow, that's really smart.
I thought about that.
Not even a Twilight reference to be found.
No, because I don't know. I was on a roll.
Very smart. That's very, very thoughtful.
Yeah, and that's my main takeaway. I mean, that was my big thing. I also wrote.
You loved this movie.
I did. I connected with it a lot. I also said just one last comment. I also love that it changed protagonists. Like you see less and less of Margot and more of Eve as Eve becomes relevant and Margot fades. Like Margot literally fades out of the movie.
Yep.
And it's I like this show don't tell structure of that where it was like the movie's kind of split into two.
Yep.
So I've got a couple.
And that whole thing is it's the theme.
Oh yeah,
Metaphor.
and this is exactly what I was talking about with the shots before and the technical things. Like the writing of this movie is like explains and harmonizes perfectly with what the themes and what it's trying to say are. And I think that it's a perfectly written movie.
Nice.
And in between it has zingers. It has there's funny parts of this movie too. It's like there's a lot going on. It's extremely dense. I would rewatch it and probably find 5 more new things.
Oh yeah.
So I'll jump over to trivia. We mentioned some of them already. Years later, Bette Davis said in an interview, filming All About Eve was a very happy experience. The only B in the cast was Celeste Holm.
Iconic. I just love her.
Let's see. Daryl F. Zanuck was so confident that the film would be a smash hit that no advance audience screenings were held.
Wow, that's like what Michael Bay does, but for the opposite reason.
Only press screenings. In a confident move, the studio even financed the production of 4 trailers to advertise the film, which was unheard of back then.
4.
Yeah, which you get that. Now, Oppenheimer's going to have 4 trailers.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Barbie will.
Yeah. After the film's release, Bette Davis implored Mankiewicz to write a sequel that would focus on Margot and Bill, played by still Gary Merrill. Mm-hmm. Many years later, after she and Merrill had married and divorced, Davis ran into Mankiewicz and said to him, "Joe, you can forget that sequel. I've played it and it doesn't work."
She's just the best.
She just didn't care. She was a beast. She was the president of the Academy at one point.
Queen.
It didn't go that well because she wanted to do her own thing.
Yeah, of course.
And all these like uptight old hardline producers were like, "No way."
Come on, let Betty do it.
I got some casting.
We don't know any of these people.
Well, we know Ingrid Bergman, who I just mentioned. She had just fallen in love with Italian director Roberto Rossellini and didn't want to leave Italy.
Is that Isabella Rossellini?
Probably. Yeah.
Somebody related to her?
Marlene Dietrich was considered for the role, too.
I know her.
It was decided that she was too German.
I was going to say she was German, right?
Yeah. According to the casting director's list, 2 people considered for the roles of Bill and Eve were Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan. That's wild.
Was Nancy an actress? Yeah, she was an actress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, considered for the role of Miss Caswell, which eventually went to Marilyn Monroe, Zsa Zsa Gabor was considered, and George Sanders was like, nah. And Angela Lansbury was considered.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So
Cabaret,
that's
baby.
I cut.
Wait, was she in Cabaret?
I don't know. I haven't seen Cabaret. I cut it there because I didn't know 90% of the people. One last piece of trivia. Actually, no, 2 more. Davis smokes all throughout the movie.
Yeah.
In an age when stars use cigarettes as props, she doesn't smoke as behavior or to express her moods or because she wants to. It actually physically sets her apart from others because she's clouded with smoke all the time. That was the purpose of her smoking cigarettes.
Interesting.
And it says she is often seen within a cloud of smoke, which seems like her charisma made visible. So she's like radiating, you know? Mm-hmm. Let's see. There was one other thing I saw. Oh, Bette Davis said in her autobiography, and I love this, "I can think of no project that from the outset was as rewarding from the first day to the last.
No.
It is easy to understand why. It was a great script, had a great director, and was a cast of professionals with parts they liked. It was a charmed production from the word go."
Love it.
You always hear about all these like crazy sets
Yeah.
and all these like awful feuds and everything, so it's refreshing to hear somebody as often bristly as Bette Davis say like, "This was awesome. I loved it. I loved every minute of it."
And I bet that she's been on
Except for Celeste Holm.
Yeah. I bet she's been a part of some like rough sets.
Oh,
anybody
absolutely.
in like that time was. So
Yep.
that's awesome.
And finally, I have the Roger Ebert review, which you touched on a bit. He gave it 4 stars out of 4. Shocking. I think it was added to his great movies list.
Why not?
Here's just a couple of excerpts from it. He said, "Growing older was a smart career move for Bette Davis, whose personality was adult, hard-edged, and knowing. Never entirely comfortable as an ingenue, she was glorious as a professional woman, a survivor, or a bitchy predator. Her veteran actress Margot Channing in All About Eve was her greatest role. It seems to show her defeated by the wiles of a younger actress, but in fact marks a victory, the triumph of personality and will over the superficial power of beauty. She never played a more autobiographical role." The movie's strength and weakness is Anne Baxter, whose Eve lacks the presence to be a plausible rival to Margot, but is convincing as the scheming fan. When Eve understudies for Margot and gets great reviews, Mankiewicz wisely never shows us her performance.
Yeah.
Better to imagine it and focus on the girl whose look is a little too intense, whose eyes a little too focused, whose modesty is somehow suspect. Mankiewicz came from a family of writers. His brother Herman wrote Citizen Kane. He won back-to-back Oscars for writing and directing A Letter to 3 Wives in 1949 and All About Eve. He is also remembered for The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, The Barefoot Contessa,
Ina.
Guys and Dolls. He remained sharp-tongued all of his days. When All About Eve was recycled into the Broadway musical Applause, Mankiewicz observed that the studio had received infinitely more in royalties than it paid him for writing and directing the film. He said he had no complaints. The reason they have the no refund sign in the theater ticket window, he said, is to keep the rubes from calling the cops. So that was Ebert's review.
Ebert's the best.
He loved it. Another thing, Alfred Newman did the score for this movie.
Mad Magazine.
He is the father of Thomas Newman and the uncle of Randy Newman.
You got a friend in
The
me.
Newman family has like 91 Oscar nominations.
They're not related to Paul, are they?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
They're all composers. Let me see. Newman family Oscar nominations. Thomas Newman is among the people. Thomas Newman is among the people who has so many nominations without winning.
Yeah.
The
Diane Warren.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Shout out. The Newman Family has 12 awards on 76 nominations.
Yo, that's not a good percentage.
No, it's not. And they're all for
It's my percentage of winning my bracket.
they're all for score and song, which
Cool.
is really cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think that's all I've got
Great.
on All About Eve.
All About Eve.
I think that's All About Eve. So does All About Eve make Baby's first watch list?
Yes.
Definitely, especially if he likes movies. If he doesn't like movies, he's not going to watch any of
I
these.
don't
So,
know why he would watch All About Eve if he didn't like movies.
do you have a takeaway?
I never think.
Always prepared for this question.
I wrote down answers to all these questions that you gave me. I never think about this one. I
have it in all caps at the bottom.
Go ahead.
No, just in general. I mean,
what's yours?
I have two. Don't sell your soul.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Fame doesn't matter. Money matters a little bit, but you don't need to make yourself unhappy in order to make excess money.
Yeah.
Number two, try to age gracefully. Don't try to act like you're younger than you are, because it's not a cute look. It's okay to get older. It's fun.
It's fun.
I'm 31 years old now.
We have fun.
Yeah, that's not old, but it's older than I, would like to be.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so that's All About Eve.
It was a great episode.
Yeah, hope you listened.
It's a little wonky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was a little more serious.
That's what I'm saying. And we were like,
I don't know what I'm going to clip from this.
Real stuff.
Yeah, true.
Real love.
Yeah, we'll have to sit and figure it out and listen to it.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's All About Eve. Next week is our final movie of March already.
That's wild because I feel like March was jam packed.
Yeah. We had the extra thing with
Are
the
we
Oscar
doing Pitch
stuff.
Perfect?
We're doing 2012's Pitch Perfect. Anna Kendrick,
We're out
Anna
Mount
Camp.
Rushmore of what should have been Best Picture.
Exactly. Rebel Wilson, Adam Devine, Brittany Snow. It's so fun.
It's the best.
Don't be a troublemaker. Just join us next week.
Be a Barton Bella.
Yeah, exactly. Rate, review, subscribe, follow. Barton.
Barton Bella.
Yeah, follow us on everything. You already do, hopefully. If you don't, whatever. That's that. We will see you next week for Pitch Perfect. See you later.